And that they, I think it was said that there were several
Yes.
places.
Most of them are very small.
Can you go over that?
Do
And that?
you have right-of-way plans?
I do not have the right-of-way plans, but
I have a very small set here. Most of them are very, what we call sliver takings, in order to accommodate the sidewalk needed, because all the sidewalks need to be ADA accessible, Americans with Disabilities Act. So they're very small, and the majority of them are for what we call temporary construction easements. So when the workmen are performing the work out on the project site, they actually have to take a temporary easement to even step a foot on your property under the federal laws. So the federal laws are very stringent on how they do acquisitions. And 1 foot, 1 rake over the line onto your property, and it's required to take a temporary easement for construction purposes.
Okay, at some point that'll be detailed, or?
Yes, we have plans, that just not on
Right.
the board.
sometimes like the property line isn't quite at the back of sidewalk. It might be a few inches off, so even those few inches kind of we have to account for.
Right, every inch needs to be accounted for. And sometimes when we go out and the consultant does their survey, they'll find that the town has, over the years, might have, without knowing it really, kind of put some of their infrastructure or sidewalk on private property. So we want to make sure that that gets rectified, so that in the worst case scenario, if there was ever a slip and fall, someone doesn't go after the property owner, they would go after the town.
Okay, I was just curious, because I
And we
couldn't see
just
where
want
it
to
was.
make sure that
Right.
everybody is covered and no one has to suffer for the project.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. Jeannie Burns, B-U-R-N-S. I'm a resident of Milton. I live on Governor's Road, which is on the west side of the highway. And our street takes a lot of traffic for people wanting to head north, get into Boston or west of Milton. And the highway gets backed up, and people will cut through Quincy to get up Governor's Road and into and through Milton. I think the traffic coming off of the highway into the square, when that is backed up, we see a lot more cars on our street, over 2,000 on a residential street. I would love to see, I know that Boulevard Street is supposed to come down, coming east, 3 lanes. I kind of wish there was a way to get off of the highway into the square and right up onto Boulevard Street and Edge Hill Road without having to circle around the square. I think if people had an easy way to get off of the highway and head west on the main roads of Milton, they wouldn't have to cut through some of the smaller side streets that are on the west side of Milton. But I do love the idea of this park. I think when I think of it, I think of City Square Park in Charlestown, which is a small park surrounded by a lot of busy roads. But people gather there, I have picnics or they have events there. It is surrounded by nice fencing, which I think makes people feel, safe to let their kids run around. I walk down through the square, I park in the square. Parking does need to be addressed. I'm really excited about better ways to walk through the square that feel safer. But that's my main comment is that I think more than traffic coming down Boulevard Street into the square, there's more cars that are trying to get up Granite Ave and head west than there are people trying to head east into the square. I think that would be more of a priority, to try to keep people on those main roads off of the highway and keep them on the main roads through Milton so that they don't have to cut through some of the smaller side streets.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Joe Curran, Grafton Ave, Curran.
Thank you.
So this is a long process for me. I started attending the meetings with Howard Stern Hudson back in 2011. So, and I understand this is kind of a continuation of that project. I guess we've moved into the next phase. And, you know, everybody has different opportunities they want to see for the square, parking, traffic, bike lanes, traffic management, pedestrian access. I'm in favor of it all. I don't object to any of this. I am on the first street on the west side. For those of you who don't know, it's right at the intersection of Boulevard Street and Edge Hill Road. And specifically, most of my comments have been around the design at Boulevard Bryant Ave. And because I don't drive to the square, I don't ride my bike to the square. I walk to the square because of my proximity to it. And so one of the things that is new to me, and I've attended some of these meetings, is we're talking about 3 lanes on Boulevard Street now. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, does that mean we're converting Boulevard Street to a one-way street?
It's just in this section between Bryant and Granite.
Between Bryant Ave and Grafton Avenue, you mean, west?
Granite. Just that short section you see on the plan right there,
okay.
not Boulevard Street past Bryant.
Okay,
You
so
can still turn up Boulevard Street.
the
going
vertical
west.
section you were showing was at the intersection over the highway, not over
Right,
the
yes.
intersection? Okay. I think it's important that there be some sort of a section that shows what you're going to do at that particular intersection, because sitting in the meeting, I thought that you were talking about making Boulevard Street one-way.
The whole way, okay.
Okay?
Yep.
And I know that in some of the renderings I've seen, and it's corrected here, but the right-hand only lane that's there, I know in one of the renderings it showed that it was no longer a right-hand only turning lane. It was going straight through, and I see here that the right-hand only lane is going to remain. I want to make sure that that's going to remain. There have been a lot of issues with traffic, as some other people have said, and that relieves the traffic at that intersection. And we were talking a little bit about sidewalks and ADA and some other issues. And again, at that particular intersection, there's a traffic control box, there's telephone poles. Historically, over the years, we have not removed snow on that particular street on the right-hand side, and I think that has a lot to do with all of the obstructions that are there. And I would hope that maybe in this process there would be an opportunity to look at those sidewalks that go up the street there. I don't know exactly where this project ends. It goes up at least to where the Jackrabbit starts, at least by the rendering. And the traffic control box, I think, could come out and go someplace else in the square where there might give back some space. And I think you'd find from your ADA study that that particular area is not handicap accessible. And I think it's an opportunity. Same thing with the telephone poles. I think if you remove the telephone poles, you'll improve access. And I have one other question, and I know it's also not part of this project, but there is a stair that comes down or goes up off of Bryant Ave. I was wondering who has jurisdiction to that stair, and whether it's the state or the town of Milton?
I'm not sure what stair you're referring to.
There's a stair at the end of Martin Terrace that comes down onto Bryant Ave.
That'd be in the town's jurisdiction.
It is the town's jurisdiction. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Lee Toma, Aberdeen Road, and a member of the Milton Bike Committee. I've got a few comments.
How do you spell your name, sir?
Sorry, T-O-M-A.
Thank you.
And a few comments. First of all, I really like the comment about having a fountain there. And on a really hot day like today, and you're out running or going for a bike ride, something like that, you go to communities like Concord, and they have a drinking fountain, which is a really nice thing to have there. And I think it's something that brings people together in areas like that. I'd like to see something like that in Milton, East Milton Square, if possible, at least for the warmer weather. And I think they turn that off in the wintertime. Another thing, We've done some traffic studies and looked at both pedestrian and bicycle usage in East Milton Square, and we've seen a number of things. So one of them is that a lot of the people using bicycles in East Milton Square are children who don't have any other way to get around, so they're usually riding on the sidewalks and going through the square directly. So there are two desire paths that they're using. One is straight through on Adams Street, so they basically use the road that is there now, and that's going to be changed into a parking lot. I don't know if they're going to want to follow the shared use path that's designed there or not. It'd be nice if somehow we could encourage that. And the other desire path that is being used is the commuter route from Edge Hill Road going to Granite Avenue northbound. And again, the parking lot is right in the middle of where that would be. So a lot of people use that, and if there's a way to make that path safer or create one for people to use, that would be helpful too. Another question I have is, considering that so many people, well, there aren't many people bicycling through the area, and as a gentleman mentioned, it's because it's kind of intimidating and scary. Have you considered the possibility of using wider sidewalks or cycle tracks to make it more friendly, especially for the children that are using it? Because more experienced cyclists can manage on the road, but the younger ones probably could use a safer path that's separated from traffic and away from car doors and away from cars pulling in and out of parking spaces. So if you could consider those possibilities, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And some thoughts.
We got one?
If you could keep it brief.
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Yes, sir.
Could I speak from a seat?
Oh,
Sure.
sure.
Yes, sir.
You want to swap seats with me? Sure. Thank you. Senator Joyce introduced me a little earlier in the meeting. I am John Cronin. And he and I work together on many issues, and we're in agreement on most. And we wouldn't be here, none of us would be here tonight except for his club as chairman of the bond committee. Chairman Milton, thank you for holding this hearing to provide the public with the opportunity to become fully acquainted with the proposed East Milton Park reconstruction project. At the outset, I present a document from Kerry Pike, professional engineer, PTOE, principal director of transportation and planning, and the director of the East Milton parking and access study conducted at the cost of $138,000. This is that document. And the other attachments that I'm going to refer to. She wrote that her firm, Howard Stein Hudson's final report to the town of Milton contained not only proposed changes to the Manning Community Park, but a host of other options to improve parking in East Milton Square. including, and they're listed in the document. It was our recommendation, this is a quotation, it was our recommendation to the town that all of these options be tried before going through the process of turning much of the Manning Community Park into a parking area. That was not done, and Mass DOT should, as the Federal Highway Administration certainly will, explore all feasible and prudent alternatives. I am a civil engineer, former Milton Park Commissioner, and the retired town administrator of the town of Milton for 34 years. I've been familiar with this site since it was a railroad roadbed. I am opposed to project 607330, and I ask that you remand it back to the town to study, quote, feasible and prudent alternatives. In 1953, the Southeast Expressway, now I-93, was designed through Milton over the objections of the Board of Selectmen. Homes and businesses were condemned, and a deeply depressed highway which divided the community was constructed. The depressed highway was locally described as the canyon. It split the village of East Milton in half. In 1993, after years of protest, Congressman Brian Donnelly identified the federal FHWA demonstration project. Its purpose was to repair environmental damage caused by federal highway construction. It was determined that certain airspace in East Milton could be used for this purpose. Parking spaces for the business district did not qualify and were not sought. A landscape park of almost 1 acre in size was approved for the federal demonstration grant. The demonstration was to build a small park for public use and a, quote, town common for pedestrian use on a deck via air rights. The stated goal of a landscape deck was, quote, integrating the highway into the community and with the local environment, comma, and enhancing the area. This park was not for picnics or kite flying. Its importance is visual access, and it is viewed every day by thousands. The area was enhanced as intended. It reunited the community with landscape greenery. The Mass DOT project proposed parking lot would violate the premise and the purpose of the federal demonstration project, which funded the East Milton deck. The state and the town air right project agreement allowing this deck and park was signed in 1993, and it incorporated all of the above definitions. It was a park. From the get-go, it was a park, not a playground. The agreement requires the town to maintain the deck, including the pavers and landscape. The state has authorized the lease of air rights, had authorized, this is an interesting side note, the state had authorized the lease of air rights for a private parking deck just north of this deck, but the town meeting voted against the required zoning for a parking lot. 1997, the state legislature in 1997 adopted Chapter 82 to name the deck as the M. Joseph Manning Community Park. Mass DOT and some others mistakenly assumed that this act established the park, and that by modifying the naming act might allow the park to be reconfigured into parking spaces for the adjacent business. In fact, The park was established by the FHW Federal Demonstration Agreement, which both the Board of Selectmen and the State Public Works Commissioners pledged to respect and maintain, and signed in 1993. The diversion of parks for parking spaces, as the Mass DOT proposes, is prohibited under state and federal laws. Congressman Stephen Lynch and former Secretary of Transportation, former Mass Secretary of Transportation Jeffrey Mullen, have each cautioned that these park protection measures be taken seriously. 2012, a clumsy effort to bypass Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution Park Protection Law was attempted by the adoption of, well, I might say the artful adoption of Chapter 242 of the Acts of 2012, a large bond authorization. Section 2A references the naming law, Chapter 82 of 97, as if that act established the park from which Article 97 exemption was sought. Actually, the park was established in 1993 by both the federal and state government. Chapter 242 was not voted on by the Milton Town Meeting and was not known to have had a public hearing for Milton input. It was a backdoor effort, which may have been the result of merchants and Chamber of Commerce lobbying to divert parkland for parking spaces. A normal way to get Article 97 exemption is by a town meeting vote, submitting a petition to the legislature, a public hearing, and then winning the required 2/3 vote and obtaining the governor's signature. Federal park protection. The federal government has funded the deck park for remedial environmental purposes. These purposes are protected by the Federal Transportation Act, Section 4F. The Mass DOT parking lot, as proposed, clearly conflicts with the purposes of the 1993 Federal Demonstration Project Park. Today, the landscape deck would have been called mitigation. Mass DOT's proposal to destroy up to 60% of the park appears unlawful. The FHWA officials have given plenty of warning. Mass DOT should have obtained pre-approval before getting to the 25% point. Confusion. On a large, complicated project, misunderstandings may arise. The Parking and Access Study Director on making the March 18, 2011 filed report to the selectmen stated, quote, that no one told them it was a park, end quote. This may have been wishful, and it certainly confused the Board of Selectmen. And the selectmen, from my experience, aren't easy to confuse. The 1993 agreement said it was a park. The legislature said it was a park. At the March 18th, 2011 public hearing, my testimony explained that it was a park protected by Article 97. That report is on the website of the town for this project. It is my studied conclusion that Mass DOT should not have proceeded with the design of this project and should discontinue any further design work until clarity is obtained. On October 20th, 2011, the Federal Highway Administration, John McVan, Director of Project Delivery, acknowledged receipt of the Parking and Access Study by letter to the Planning Director, Milton Planning Director, which he attached. He wrote, which is attached, it's in the packet that I've given to you, Mr. Noah, that the town this is a quote, McMahon writes, "The town letter states that the landscape direct is not subject to section 4F. However, the FHWA is responsible for making all decisions relating to section 4F applicability and compliance," which I think Michael confirmed tonight. Attached is the November 21, 2011 letter to the Milton Planning Director from Mass Dot Paul Nelson, a project manager, writing, this was after he had reviewed the parking and access study report. He wrote, quote, "Based on the general consensus of the departmental staff, comma, it is the opinion of Mass Dot that the park is subject to review under both Article 97 and Section 4F." And further wrote, "The final decision of each regulation does not rest with our department." I don't know who does make that decision. On February 23rd, 2015, I wrote to the FHWA of my concerns about compliance with NEPA, including Section 4F. On April 6, 2015, Pamela Stevenson wrote me advising, quote, "Should this project move forward, we will need to review and approve related environmental actions under the NEPA, including Section 4F evaluation, as well as any changes proposed to the previously executed agreement related to the use of the airspace over I-93. And that she's referring to that agreement, airspace license agreement, October 6th, 1993, which was signed by the Board of Selectmen and the State DPW, to obtain the park and landscape deck as the environmental mitigation for the canyon. So it's quite clear that we have a problem on 4F.
I wouldn't call it a problem, I'd say there's a process. But continue,
All right.
and we
I'm just
can
about
begin
finished.
addressing some of your comments.
I'm just about finished.
Sure.
Other major parking generators of clients in the East Milton Square provide off-street parking. These include the banks, funeral homes, office complexes, restaurants, and even Dunkin' Donuts. It is easy to understand that a business next to the deck would seek a parking lot across from the front door, especially appealing if the state and federal government unwittingly are agreeing to destroy a park for parking lot purposes and spend millions of dollars. I mean, that's a rational quest, but unfortunate as alternatives are available. Those feasible and prudent alternatives remain unexplored. The local newspaper reported a BCAC meeting where the consultant pointed out that there were 4 residences behind the fitness center which could be developed for 41 or so parking lots. These 3 of the houses are owned by committee members. The newspaper account of the discussion reported willingness by those parties to discuss, although not donating. Their equity was not an offer. Yet this possible, feasible, and prudent alternative has not been explored. Why? Well, it's because the Mass Dot has offered free land and lots of money. The police chief and chair of the Traffic Commission recently advised the Board of Selectmen that he recommended parking meters or parking stations for East Milton Square. His recommendation followed the East Milton Parking and Access Report. You've got a copy of that confirmation. The Parking and Access Report stated, June 2011, on page 82, summarizing local preferred options, quote, "We believe that parking meters should be strongly considered by the Board of Selectmen, regardless of reservations previously expressed by the Chamber of Commerce and some members of the BCAC. The federal review will ask for the outcome of these considerations. Meters usually pay for themselves. Dedham Square has had a positive experience with new parking systems. A copy of page 82 is enclosed. Finally, because of the public notices for this hearing, Chairman Miller, which were published during the peak vacation period, we would especially ask that the period for written comments be extended to October 1st. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin. I think we can extend the comment period as requested to October 1st.
So, Mr. Cronin, I think I'm very impressed with the amount of homework that you've done and your understanding of a very esoteric federal regulation. I spend a lot of my days explaining to people, and I think this is it's a big part of what I do, is ensure that all of MassDOT's construction program complies with federal law, and most notably, I'm responsible for NEPA 4F and the state equivalent MEPA. But I'd ask you to keep your seat because I have a question for you.
Well, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to just
okay.
I'm going to pass my comments on.
Okay.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Chairman Miller.
I think that some of the statements you've made about Section 4F would be much more applicable if the project's sole purpose and need was or sole purpose is to address the parking need that some folks here have expressed and others have reiterated tonight. But I guess what my question to you is, it sounds as though you feel very strongly about the protection of the park as it exists today. What we're proposing is not only a parking lot that provides access to East Milton Square, possibly the abutting neighborhoods and the businesses that are within the square, but also as a resource for the park itself. Clearly, this is not a huge space. The overall open space in the park now is around 28,000 square feet, and what we're proposing moves that notch down to about 20,000 square feet, an overall 28% reduction in quote-unquote green space. But that also includes a number of the green space islands that are currently under-maintained and isolated and don't really serve much function. I would argue to Federal Highway that those areas are not protected under Section 4F and overall are not don't have the attributes which should qualify for 4F protection. And that's the discussion that we have ongoing with Federal Highway. But what we're proposing is not only a parking lot. We're proposing a parking lot adjacent to a revitalized park space that, frankly, from what we're hearing from most people, is that it's underutilized and we haven't capitalized on the investment that was made in the 90s to span over the canyon, as you all refer to it, which it is. And I think that there is a process that we can undergo that ultimately demonstrates compliance with the Section 4F regulations and results in an overall enhancement and benefit to the park itself. Because what we're hearing from people, not only tonight, but throughout the last several years as the planning study and now this initial project development has begun, is that it's not serving the needs, that it's not providing the environmental mitigation benefit that it was originally intended. Sure, there are trees and there are landscaping.
We disagree on that, I believe.
I believe that we do.
Michael, to make a long story short, there is an abandoned roadway, the Adams Street.
Yes.
And if that was reconfigured, then I would be willing to work with you on that. you say that we're only 7,000 square feet apart?
When you take into consideration the area of the abandoned, the discontinued Adams Street, yes, the overall change is about, is 7,700 square feet of new paved area. Otherwise,
I have not said I'm against reconfiguring the park.
and I don't intend to, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth.
I'm willing to talk about that, but reducing it by 60%, which was also authorized by Chapter 242, is not acceptable.
So that's not what we're doing.
So
And
maybe we should talk further.
I believe
rather
we should, because I think
everybody,
that there's a lot of opportunity here in right now, in taking advantage of some of the traditions that the town already has in place. There are currently 2 annual events, right? Halloween, as I understand it, I've never attended, but at Halloween.
You're not counting the people driving by, Michael. You're not wanting to count them, and
Right, we don't want to create a new barren
William White,
landscape.
and all the people who write about things, the book was called The Last Landscape. I mean, the visual access is a very, very important part of open space and parks.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, just for your sake and for everyone else who's here listening, you know, just recently we've engaged with our landscape architecture team at MassDOT and getting their creative juices flowing. We've been in discussion with the town and with others in the Howard Stein Hudson team and at MassDOT to find a way to have an overall benefit here that doesn't just result in another bare landscape, another paved area adding to the urban heat island effect. What we're trying to do here is make a more livable use of this park and take advantage of the capital that's already been invested in the airspace deck. As you noted, there may be off-site alternatives that are very costly and don't ultimately result in the community benefit I think that we're hearing tonight are being sought. And just to drive this point home, you know, there are a number of site controls we can add just to respond to some of the urban design type comments from earlier. There are a number of site controls that can be used. Doesn't necessarily have to be a wrought iron fence, that's very costly, but some other things that can be done to make the site feel more secure, more safe. There may be temporary uses while there are special events in place that take advantage of the parking lot as a paved surface. So it's not just about it being a parking lot, but it's a new programmable space.
Well, a lot more money was spent on the Charlestown Park than it was on this park.
Well,
And I fully support Lee Thomas' bicycling improvements and the signal improvements and many of the other efforts that Senator Joyce has spoken to. But it really rubs me, as having been over 50 years in government, to see a report come forth to the selectmen saying that you should look at this, and you should look at that, and you should look at parking meters, and you should look at land acquisitions. And because your money is free to them, and because you've got the free land for them, they don't look at anything else. And that is bad government.
well, that is you know, certainly your opinion, and you're entitled to that. And you know,
Would you disagree with me? That they shouldn't look at those alternates?
I
mean,
think
that's what
that-
the federal government tells you.
I
you have
think
to
it's
look at
just as equally fiscally responsible of the town to be capitalizing on resources that are at their disposal. And
it. Okay.
sure, Senator, feel free to come forward. But let me just make this one point, and this is just my own creativity. One of the things that, and I've worked on other projects like this, where we've transformed the urban landscape and taken advantage of paved surfaces and turned them into something that's much more usable by the community and provides that overall benefit for everybody. Let me ask the question to the town, because I'm not from Milton. I lived in North Quincy for a few years. I don't know if that's a popular thing to say here or not.
Sure.
But you know, so I'm not terribly familiar. But in Jamaica Plain, we had a very significant project where we took down an overpass. Now, you guys have already built one, and it's a good one.
I remember when it was built.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll have to talk more about that. But one of the big programming issues that we kept hearing from folks was about having the availability of space for farmers markets. So we were able to design a paved plaza area that during most hours of the day was mostly just for pedestrians moving along the corridor, but during special events could be, the space was designed in such a way that it could be programmed to accommodate setting up tents and moving trucks in. And so that those additional parking spaces now aren't just parking for the businesses across the street, they're for the businesses that are coming in and selling produce and locally grown meat in your town and adding to that benefit. And then, you know, think of it like this, that the folks who are coming to that market, they have a reason to be in that park. There's a destination for them there. And that's, I don't mean to say we're building a farmer's market. What I mean to say is that there is a process that we can undergo starting from today that has where we're inclusive of many of these ideas and start to draw out what's going to maximize the investment that the town and MassDOT are currently proposing.
My wife was running the Milton Farmers Market for 19 years, and she's here, and she's probably getting a hook to try to get me off the stage.
Well, in lieu of the time for everyone, I'll end my comments there. I look forward to working with you on it and everybody else in this room, because I think that there's a very significant opportunity in terms of taking an urban design approach to really improve the urban fabric of East Milton Square for everybody.
So you're familiar with the Southwest Corridor?
Very.
Well, in 1963, a group of us called the Committee on Safety took the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, wasn't called the DOT, then it was called Department of Transportation or something,
DPW.
and the commissioner was Francis Sargent, to court over a predecessor law to 97, which prohibited taking parkland, not open space, but parkland for non-park purposes. And the case was Robbins versus the Commonwealth of Mass, and we prevailed, and we stopped the Southwest Corridor. And then it was, they then had the Boston Transportation Planning Review, which we participated in, Frank, Fred Savarucci, and a whole bunch of others worked with us, and we changed the history of transportation planning in the United States.
And I applaud you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Cronin.
It's not this park, all parks.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much for your insight. Senator Joyce?
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of comments from John Cronin, who has probably done, first of all, very kind remarks to me, and I appreciate it. And John's probably done more to preserve the character of the town of Milton than any person who's ever lived in the town of Milton. And like John, I was a park commissioner, and like John, I love parks. I spent my morning today, John, with the DCR. We created a new park in Quincy, in Canton, at the old Canton Airport site, which is now called the Farnham Conley Park, just opened. And coincidentally, the purpose of our visit was, among other things, to try to connect where you helped stop the Route 95 down at the end of Royal Street, try to provide an underground bicycle way so that this multi-use bike path that we've built from Castle Island and South Boston that comes out now through Dorchester and Milton, and we're looking to continue it down Truman Parkway and Blue Hills Parkway and out to Canton and connect to this new park. It was interesting, as you were talking, I'm thinking that was 53 years ago. And sometimes the big ship of government does move slowly, and I think that's what's happened in this instance. So like you, I love parks. We also continued on to Truman Parkway, where this same bond bill that had language in it that you disagree with authorizes the construction of a new park in Milton that I'm trying to get built off Truman Highway along that near that contaminated land and turn that into a new park for the town with a canoe launch and the like. We continued on Truman Highway and Blue Hills Parkway, and we're looking to get another 250 trees planted. But I wanted to, there's a couple of characterizations that I disagree with. First of all, the original legislation, it was Chapter 82 of the Acts of 1997, and it was entitled A Petition for Legislation to Designate a Certain Overpass in the Town of Milton as the Honorable M. Joseph Manning Community Park. It is an overpass. I took the position for many years. First of all, when the facility opened, it clearly missed the mark in terms of both aesthetics and functionality. There were no young parents interested in walking baby strollers over the expressway, no shoppers or neighbors interested in sitting on park benches and breathing noxious fumes. Access to the green space was difficult at best, and the green space, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, was elevated. There were some they've been removed now, but there were some wooden structures resembling pagodas that really nobody quite understood. There was no parking, despite a growing need for it. Since that time, the town has hired consultants. We've had an extraordinary number of public meetings, published various options on the town website, and there was this issue raised that we couldn't make changes because under Article 97 of the state constitution from 1972, designed to ensure that the people have, quote, the right to clean air and water, freedom from excessive and unnecessary noise, and the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic qualities of their environment. I just didn't think that was applicable here. Moreover, the EOEA, which is the arbiter of whether Article 97 applies, gave me an informal opinion that it did not apply. The issue was not ripe, it was not before it. Moreover, both the House and the Senate Council opined that it was not a park and Article 97 did not apply. Nevertheless,
Because you asked them.
so as to, no, it was a valid legal opinion, one I share. But so as to put the matter to rest, I introduced the legislation, not in a backdoor manner. In fact, there were more hearings for that legislation than there were on the previous, the original legislation designating this overpass, the Manning Community Park. But in any event, we thought we put that issue to rest. And it's, as is pointed out, it's not just to create parking for the merchants. I put language in there that you characterize it, and I say this respectfully, as a reduction of the green space by 60%. Quite the contrary. To my knowledge, the original legislation had no requirement whatsoever as to the amount of green space. I put in a stopgap, a 40% requirement that they could not go below. So I believe the legislation actually increased and made it law that it has to be green space. But it's also part of the entire improvement. Phil talked about traffic. I couldn't agree more. Cars coming off the expressway to avoid some of the traffic, cutting through East Milton Square. Bicyclists need to have access, which they don't have now. We have it in other parts of town. We see Blue Hills Parkway. We see what a good state investment in. To the question about financing, now $1 million of this is state bond money that I put in, and yes, it can be deauthorized if we don't act. The investment that the state made in Central Avenue has revitalized that business district, and Milton Village has revitalized that business district, but to the benefit of the neighbors as well, has increased property values dramatically. I think that will happen here. I think the East Milton neighborhoods will see higher property values as people can have this wonderful resource enhanced. It'll also improve the traffic flow in the surrounding areas, has been pointed out. I think it's all good, John. I think we're talking a difference of about 7,000 square feet of green space, and we can replicate that elsewhere. We can add green space elsewhere. We're happy to work with you. But I'm reluctant to look at the federal law as a still further impediment to try to stop this. I don't think that all change is necessarily bad, and I think this one is long overdue.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make one more comment.
You are
I'm
again,
Phil
sir?
Johenning, Johenning. I'm a concerned resident. You know, as long as we're like blowing, I'm sorry? As long as we're blowing away the green space anyway, I remember reading a blog that I thought was very interesting, and they thought that the whole problem with traffic in East Milton Square was the fact that Adams Street had been cut to begin with. So if you're blowing away the green space anyway, why not reconnect Adams Street? People talk about like cut through because of people trying to get to the western part of Milton. You know, and I think Adams Street would be a fantastic thoroughfare. If you look at it, it's a natural. So if we're talking about traffic, or if traffic is a huge concern here, why not reconnect Adams Street and look at that as part of as a traffic solution? I think traffic, again, is the major problem, and traffic is the thing that needs to be addressed here. And as long as we're not going to have trees, bushes, grass, et cetera, why not just reconnect Adams Street? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Tom Hurley, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. It's Hurley. Yeah, just a few things. First of all, we've been studying this reconfiguration and what to do about East Milton Square for an awful long time now. And granted, we may have some federal Article 4 problems, but let's not stop this thing and you know, with the potentially losing more federal money. So let's continue on as those decisions progress. I've been saying for 5 years now that park could be made more vibrant. I think this plan does that. I said 5 years ago I could envision, you know, perhaps you know, vending carts during the day out on that green as a way to create more you know, more merchandising throughout the square, help the other businesses. The other thing is, you know, people have said, you know, we got to get traffic moving through the square. Well, yeah, that's true, but not at 40 miles an hour. We don't want that. We don't want Adams Street, when we closed it, helped pedestrian traffic come across from the west side to the east side. If we reconnect that again, we've got that same problem where you're crossing street after street after street with lots of traffic. So no, I don't agree. I think it calmed traffic. I don't think it hurt the flow of traffic. I think it helped it initially. There's been more traffic that's picked up. I'm not sure that opening Adams Street would help at all. But I do want to make sure that as traffic comes through the square, they go through there efficiently, slowly. It is a business district. It should be going through at 20 miles an hour so people can see the businesses that are there. We have to get parking-wise, we have to make sure that parking spaces turn over more. I am in favor, can't talk for my other selectmen, but I personally am in favor of pay stations as a way to just basically get turnover of parking spaces. The idea that that's a parking lot for Fitness Unlimited, we can control that. We can control the amount of time that you can park in there. You know, keep it an hour or less, then it doesn't become. You know, let people, most people that do business in the square do business for 15, 20 minutes. You know, not 2 hours. So, you know, there are other places that those 2-hour people could park. They can afford to walk a little further. But if you want to go there for 15 minutes, you don't want to spend 20 minutes walking. So, you know, all those, I think, are a consideration.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Diane DiTullio Agostino, Agostino, former Milton selectwoman. In fact, I was actually a selectwoman and Mr. Cronin was the town administrator during the period of time that the current structures were built, to which, to our dismay, weren't exactly what they thought they would be. When you think of the term park, you think easily accessible for everyone. You think of a lot of green grass, and you think of safe air quality. And someone earlier this evening asked, about Milton, and if there, I think the question was as far as, who do we have to speak up for the disabled residents? And the Commission on Disability does exist in Milton, and so during your process, if there's any way that, the Commission can get the layouts and have any reviews, that would be wonderful. One of my own personal concerns, serious concerns, is that the Mass Department of Transportation do everything they can to work with Mr. Cronin, because I do understand he's a very strong advocate against the current design you're proposing. And I urge that because right now it is so unsafe. We cannot leave this section of town to be this unsafe, not just for the pedestrians who are abled, but for those pedestrians who need the extra lighting with the sounds, I forget the exact term of what they're called, who need the safer sidewalks. It also concerns the safety of the air quality. I do recall when the plans were originally proposed, and I've recently asked to find out, there was a discussion about fans. There were a lot of people in Milton with asthma, whether it comes from the airplane issues or the expressway issues, we probably will never know. But there are a lot of people who have issues with air quality. So I would ask the department to take a look at that, because as great as it is to bring more people there, and the concept that the parking lot would actually be used to have, other events, including farmers market or whatever, really does say a park doesn't have to be all grass. A park can be asphalt, as we well know. So I really appreciate that you emphasize that tonight. But I can't stress enough, I have friends who walk constantly back and forth to the post office. They're Milton residents as well as Milton business owners. And I can't tell you the number of times they've told me they've almost been hit. It's an accident waiting to happen. Last year during our Halloween stroll, during the Chamber's Halloween stroll, the police ended up having to, I think they added more police, and they had to shut off part of the square for safety because the lights weren't working. I just noticed today that one of the lights is no longer there and it's covered with plastic. I can't emphasize enough that people have to come together and some decision has to be made, because as the chief of police has explained, and I think I even spoke to the lighting department, the system for the lights isn't going to be replaced until a project comes forward. And whether it's a car accident or a pedestrian, we're sitting here arguing over something that's going to be an improvement over what we originally thought we were getting. And number one, it's going to improve public safety. There's just no question that public safety should be a priority, and I would think that the Mass Department of Transportation does take that into consideration. But I just hope you can all come to an agreement soon, because even waiting 18 months to get this finished is waiting too long. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Paul Hogan. I live at 56 Pierce Street in the square. That's one hat. My other hat is that I'm an attorney, and back when this first came up, the hybrid plan, I was a spokesperson for the chamber at town meeting. And I just want to remind everyone that this whole issue about the hybrid plan was presented at town meeting. And a lot of this was vetted out. And over 2/3 of the, by voice, we didn't have to even do a roll call, was pretty strong vote to go forward with this hybrid concept. And some members of the chamber recently met with the East Milton Association, and I think Mr. Dunn brought up some excellent points. And it's a very vibrant organization. It's quickly developing, and I suggested to people in the chamber that we should share together concerns about traffic, and not just this project, but other concerns about traffic in other streets that occur, and not just to leave this alone. One final point as well, that many of the merchants, we intrigued by your placing the whatever it's going to be on the park in the middle. We had a rendering that had a gazebo at the end, and some members of the chamber would like to get involved with that, or even help to see what can be done to really improve the quality of the green space. And it was an interesting concept. I never thought about a fountain until tonight, or some of these other things. But I want to just suggest that the chamber and the business merchants are interested in that. We said that at town meeting when we first passed that whatever we can do to enhance that. And there are some monuments that are on the deck right now that are really not as well placed as they could be. And one is to Mr. Manning especially. So what we would like to see happen is that the final configuration of whatever is decided on the green space, and how you structure that, and how those monuments are done should be as tasteful and as attractive as possible. And I know that the business owners, and I know that many of the residents would like to participate in those details. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. If there are no other questions or comments, I'd like to remind you that the last sheet of the handout, if you would like to submit, please use that sheet for that purpose. You may leave the sheet with me tonight, or you may mail it to the department until October 1st. And it will become a part of the official record. Before I close the hearing, I would like to say that we will be here as long as you are interested in looking at the plans. We'll try to respond to your questions that affect you personally. Thank you very much for attending and for providing us with this facility. I declare this hearing closed.